The film begins by introducing us to a good-looking guy named Tom, who is a detective. However, he doesn't always play by the rules and can be pretty tough. Because of this, he's often chosen to go undercover for assignments. One day, Tom gets a job to catch two gangsters from South Korea who are dealing in illegal weapons. So he pretends to be a guy who wants to sell them weapons. But the weapons he brings aren't what they asked for. This makes the gangsters really mad at him. And to make things worse, Tom says something offensive about their eyes, which makes them think he's a racist. They get so mad that they start beating him up. But turns out, Tom is actually letting them beat him up on purpose. He's doing this so later he can defend himself and get away with killing the gangsters. He doesn't want to be arrested for murder, so he's making it look like self-defense. Once he's got an excuse, Tom heads to the gangsters' hideout and starts fighting them in a really brutal way. He ends up killing all of them. After that intense fight, he has a drink to calm down. Then he changes the scene to make it look like a big gunfight happened. But the truth is, Tom basically just wiped out the gangsters without much trouble. While looking around the hideout, Tom finds two women who were being held captive by the gangsters. These women are from South Korea, and they're in the country illegally. At that time, he feels bad for them and decides to set them free. Not long after that, Tom's boss showed up at the scene. This guy's name was Captain Jack, and he was known for being really strict with the police. But things got tense because Tom's colleagues were upset with him. They thought he was only thinking about himself when they worked together. They started making mean comments and almost got into a fight. Seeing this, Captain Jack stepped in and separated everyone. Surprisingly, he actually praised Tom for what he did. The thing is, he knew that Tom had changed the crime scene. But when Captain Jack got close to Tom, he could smell alcohol on him. He told Tom to go to the hospital right away, before the prosecutors got there. He explained that if a cop was caught drunk, it would ruin his reputation. While Tom was waiting for an ambulance behind the scenes, his friend Washington came up to him. They used to be really good friends, but ever since Tom started being so rough on the job, Washington didn't like him as much. Right then, Washington was disappointed with him because he had killed all the South Korean gangsters. Washington thought they should have been put on trial first. The next day, Tom headed to the hospital to avoid the reporters. While he was getting treated, a cop named Captain James walked up to him. James is part of the PRVOST team, which watches over other cops suspected of doing bad things. He handed Tom his card and hoped they could team up. James said he was starting to doubt people in Tom's unit, especially Jack. After James left, a nurse named Grace came over. It turns out she's Tom's girlfriend. With some time to themselves, they ended up getting intimate right there in the hospital. When Tom got back from the hospital, he had to answer questions from the PRVOST team about his tough actions. Luckily, he had a good reason to explain what he did. The next day, Tom went to a party that Jack threw to celebrate his promotion. While they were drinking, he told Jack and the others that they were being watched by James. Jack then blamed Washington for the situation. Jack already knew that Washington reported his leadership as corrupt. According to Jack, Washington was upset because he got kicked out of the unit. Now, Washington was trying to take down Jack, Tom, and the rest. Hearing all this, Tom really wanted to confront Washington, but his colleagues stopped him right away. A few days later, Tom decided to follow Washington, thinking about giving him a bit of a scare. However, when he tracked Washington to a convenience store, he saw something unexpected: that two robbers with masks and guns. Because of that, Tom abandoned his plan. He changed his mind and decided to help Washington, even though he didn't like him much. Deep down, he still considered Washington a friend. At first, Washington thought Tom was coming to attack him, so they got into a fight. But as soon as the robbers burst in, they both hid behind a shelf. The robbers started shooting wildly around the store. At that time, Tom tried to fight back against the robbers, but he accidentally shot at Washington's shoulder. Tragically, the robbers brutally killed Washington. The police got there after hearing the commotion. Meanwhile, Tom began to panic because the store's security cameras had recorded his fight with Washington. If James or the prosecutors saw that recording, Tom could become the prime suspect. Still, Jack wasn't about to let his team members get caught, so he told Tom to get rid of the CCTV footage. Without hesitation, Tom grabbed the tape before James and the prosecutors showed up. After the incident, Jack had to move Tom to a different department, handling complaints. Every day, Tom had to listen to people complaining to the police from regular stuff to things that didn't make sense. One day, James came to talk to Tom about Washington's strange death. At that time, he brought up Tom's report that only mentioned 2 robbers at the mini market. But suddenly, the forensic team found 3 different types of bullets in Washington's body, and one of those bullets was from Tom's gun. Now James wanted the CCTV footage Tom stole. He wanted to check if Tom and his team were involved in the murder. Tom, not wanting things to get worse, spilled the beans to Jack about James' suspicions. This made Jack storm into James's office, all upset. He was mad at James for accusing Tom and the team. There, James even said he didn't like Jack and knew about his sneaky moves to get promoted. Actually, James knew that Jack had been using his team, including Tom, just so he could become a police commander. The day after, they finally laid Washington's body to rest after the autopsy. Tom and his team were there to say their final goodbyes at the funeral. While there, Tom noticed Washington's wife, Linda. Feeling concerned, Tom approached her, but sadly, Linda didn't want to talk to him at all. After getting back home from the funeral, he ran into Detective Paul, who was now handling the Washington case. Surprisingly, Paul was also pushed by Jack to tamper with Tom's involvement in the mini market incident. This annoyed Paul because he had to clear Tom's name. Even so, Tom expressed to Paul that he wanted to help with the investigation. However, Paul shut down the idea, though, as they already had suspects cause a couple of guys named Raymond and Cortez. Upon learning this, Tom told his colleagues to arrest these 2. However, his colleagues, especially Jack's assistant Richard, didn't want to get involved. In the end, Tom decided to confront Jack at his place to discuss Raymond and Cortez. There, Tom expressed his determination to take down the 2 responsible for Washington's death. Despite their differences, he still considered Washington a friend. Unfortunately, Jack wouldn't allow it due to the high risk of James finding out. The day after, Paul asked Tom to have a private talk. During their conversation, Paul revealed that Washington had been accused of involvement in illegal activities, like running a drug business. Even more, Washington was linked to Raymond and Cortez, but somehow their plan went south and he ended up dead. Adding to this, Paul confessed that James had threatened him to expose Tom's wrongdoing as well, but he was already aware of this and chose to cooperate with Paul. In the evening, Tom and Paul teamed up to dig into the case. They started by tracing Raymond and Cortez's last known location. Along the way, they encountered a Mexican gang member named Quicks, who suddenly took off. This raised suspicion, prompting them to chase after Quicks. Fortunately, Tom managed to subdue Quicks, tangling him in barbed wire. He used this to extract information. Quicks finally spilled the beans about someone who knew Raymond and Cortez, and it was a guy named Grill. Without much hesitation, Tom and Paul headed straight to Grill's place. Tom swiftly aimed his gun and ruthlessly tormented Grill, causing him to feel terrified by Tom's brutal behavior. Paul was surprised by Tom's sadistic actions. Tom then used threats to force Grill to reveal where Raymond and Cortez were hiding. Afterward, he temporarily imprisoned Grill, intending to release him once he had the information he needed. The following day, Tom visited Linda again, assuring her he would catch the culprits. But first, he wanted to ask about the money Washington had. He explained that the police suspected the money was obtained illegally. There, Linda clarified that the money came from selling her house, and she believed Washington was being framed to hide corrupt police activities. She also mentioned that he had a close relationship with James. Back at the office, Richard approached Tom and provided evidence related to the Washington murder case, cause a bullet that was found lodged in Washington's body, which happened to be Tom's. At that time, Richard assured Tom that he was no longer a suspect. Eventually, Tom received a call from Grill, who mentioned a name, Winston. Turns out, Winston was a gangster who knew the whereabouts of Raymond and Cortez. Tom wasted no time and invited Paul to join him in meeting Winston. After meeting Winston, Tom and Paul were given directions to a house where Raymond and Cortez were supposedly hiding. Upon reaching the house, they found neither of them there. However, they did discover numerous bloodstains and a strange, unpleasant odor. Shockingly, Raymond and Cortez were already dead, buried in a sad state in the house's yard. This raised suspicion for Tom, and he was now convinced that these 2 robbers weren't the true culprits behind Washington's death. He believed the real mastermind was the one who had eliminated Raymond and Cortez. To figure this out, he planned to seek Winston's help once again. Later that evening, Paul contacted Tom with news that Winston had identified two gangsters who might be Washington's real killers. Before heading to that location, Tom decided to visit Linda and apologize for his previous rudeness. He also showed her the CCTV footage from the mini-market, clarifying what had truly happened. He promised Linda that he'd bring Washington's killers to justice. Soon after, Tom opened up to Linda about losing his own wife, revealing that he understood her pain. After this heartfelt moment, he readied himself to meet the gangsters Winston had mentioned. He geared up with a weapon and initially intended to go alone, but Paul insisted on joining him. Hearing that, Tom eventually agreed. Then, as he was about to leave, James intercepted him, expressing a desire to apprehend Tom that same night. However, he asserted that he needed to take down Washington's killer first. On the flip side, James actually needed Tom's rough methods to catch the gangsters. So, eventually, he allowed Tom to proceed. To keep things short, they met the person Winston had mentioned named Eyebrow or Jude. Soon after, Tom took drugs from his shirt pocket, acting like he wanted to join their business. But surprisingly, Jude saw through his facade. At that time, Jude knew who Tom really was and understood his mission to avenge Washington. To their shock, Eyebrow and Jude turned out to be corrupt police officers, and they swiftly attacked Tom and Paul. During the clash, Winston died and Paul was fatally shot in the neck. Seeing that, Tom and Jude didn't stay silent, and they fought back, taking down the rogue officers. Sadly, Tom couldn't save Paul due to the severe bleeding. He decided to visit Grace to treat his own wounds. However, as he watched the news on TV reporting the recent shooting incident, he grew suspicious that he was being set up from the beginning. He urged Grace to distance herself, fearing for her safety. But unexpectedly, Tom's colleagues, Santos and Dom, suddenly stormed Grace's house. They arrested Tom and forcefully brought him into a car. During the ride, the truth emerged that the one behind Washington's murder was their own captain, Jack. Moreover, he was involved in a drug operation with the assistance of Eyebrow and Jude. However, his drug business got jeopardized when Tom started digging into Washington's murder. So Jack devised a plan to frame Tom, secretly unlocking his handcuffs with a wire. After that, Tom quickly disrupted Dom, who was driving. This caused their car to crash into another vehicle. Sadly, Tom ended up fainting. Later on, they brought him to the same place where Remen and Cortez had been buried. At that moment, Tom was tied up again and in serious danger. Despite this, he managed to strike Dom's head with a shovel and take down Santos with a single gunshot. Meanwhile, Richard was torturing Linda as he was following Jack's orders to get hold of the CCTV footage Tom had taken. Luckily, Tom arrived in time at Linda's house, incapacitated Richard, and locked him in the car's trunk. The next day, Tom confronted Jack at his house, asking why Jack had the heart to frame him. All this time, he had always considered Jack a friend and even family. There they argued and Jack proposed that they team up to cover up all the ongoing cases. But Tom had had enough of his deceit and assaulted him. In the midst of the struggle, Tom managed to handcuff Jack and aimed a gun at him, ready to end it all. However, Jack then revealed an incredibly surprising secret. It turned out that he had hoarded loads of money, drugs, and secrets from cases involving officials hidden within the walls of his house. He then proposed a fresh start to Tom, promising him all the money. However, Tom had changed his ways and wanted to be an honest cop. To bring his dark days to an end, Tom shot Jack, putting an end to his life. After all of the mess, Tom contacted James and asked him to collect all the evidence of Jack's crimes. Surprisingly, James intentionally allowed him to eliminate his corrupt comrades, saving himself from resorting to violence against them. Then, as a gesture of gratitude, James didn't arrest Tom. The film ends. The moral lesson from this film is always bring a shovel to a fight, because you never know when you'll need to bury the truth along with your enemies.